Welcome back, ladies. Here we are, episode 2.
So great to be back.
Welcome back.
So we've just watched season 1, episode 2, Space Quest.
What a fun time.
You know, I didn't get the meaning of this episode until the end.
Okay.
So I don't know. I didn't get it to the end. But then once I'm like, why is it space? Because I'm like, there was nothing spacey. And I said, oh, the quest for space. Got it.
Yeah, I love it. The other thing I really like is that Space Quest, right around the time that Frasier was airing, was a popular series of point-and-click adventure games made by the same people who made games like King's Quest and all of those. So there was a whole layer of pop culture references going on in this episode that
yes,
really
I picked up on another one, but we won't talk about it till we get to Frasier's wonderful breakfast routine he has. That he has to have.
All right. Yeah. So shall we just dive in? Laura, want to kick us off with our synopsis?
Certainly. So we open on Frasier, who's just woken up, and he walks out into the living room. Daphne's there. She's already started her day, and she's cleaning stuff up. And she starts trying to talk to Frasier, but he hasn't woken up yet, and he doesn't remember who she is.
This is one of my favorite examples of the title card being such a good telegraph of a quote that we're about to get. So good.
I didn't get it, and that's why I think as someone, if you're like I just did, because at first I'm like, he is so over exaggerating. Like,
yeah,
she just moved in the other day. What do you mean you don't know who she is and stuff? However, once I understand that the whole point is that like all of this change in his life is disorienting him, the stress is disorienting him, and I can understand. And you know what's funny is that when I think back to Frasier, I actually thought this was the first episode.
Oh, interesting.
And this was the one I remember the most because when I was at home with my baby at the time, I really related to it because I was like, I just want peace, just peace. I don't want someone.
I see this episode as like a continuation of the pilot. Like we find out that Daphne had just moved in yesterday, so we're picking up right where the pilot left off. And when people write a pilot, they're trying to show basically the dynamics of the show. But we don't quite get all the dynamics in the original pilot episode. We don't actually see Martin living with Frasier or Martin and Daphne living with Frasier. And in this episode, we do get that dynamic.
Mm-hmm. And I loved it. And I felt it was balanced. I totally thought it was balanced.
Absolutely. I think this is where we get to see them in more of their natural habitat, more than just a set piece of character setting. It's now everything's meshing together and it's really kind of great. Simone, you mentioned a moment ago that Frasier's disoriented, and that's something I really pinned on at the beginning part of this episode because this is a recurring theme that jumps out to me on my latest rewatch of the series. Frasier is his own best patient. So and he doesn't even realize it most of the time, but everything he's going through is some sort of a adaptation or mental health situation. And he needs to come to terms with it on his own throughout the course of the episode. And it's really, really kind of funny because you would think that given what he does for a living, he'd be super equipped to self-diagnose, but it always is a little bit of a journey.
Yeah, that we always are kind of, shy of calling out our own faults or, areas of growth. And Frasier definitely, I think he comes late to the party, but he does realize, I've got some things I need to work on too. So you definitely see that in this episode.
Yeah.
And may I comment, I did not like that robe. It looked like he was getting ready to go into a boxing match.
The barn door being open.
Yeah, first of all, close the barn door because you're right. There's a lady amongst you, men. But also, Frasier, what is that? Did you take that from Mike Tyson's closet? Like, what are you doing?
Oh, man, it was probably expensive, too.
Right, but I guess if he came out with something like a maroon or something, it would look like two Playboy mansions. I guess they had to make it that way.
Jacket. Yeah. The stripes are a little more casual.
Mm-hmm.
And he does get some nice robes later on.
He does. His fashion sense tends to evolve over the course of the series, and it is really funny to see where he starts. I mean, last week we talked about sweater vests. This week we have this horrendous robe.
Yes.
So.
And the horrible hair is still there. Ugh,
it's still there for this whole season. I mean, we gotta suffer through that for a few more episodes.
I shall endure.
We'll do the Skullet countdown for you, Simone, until we get to season 2. So that breakfast conversation is hilariously one-sided. I love Daphne's energy in contrast to Frasier's pre-coffee, pre-breakfast grumps. It's just such a good character moment.
And he was defining the moment that we now refer to as hangry. But like that's really what it was. But there was no language for that then,
Uh-huh.
But he was very hangry. He's like, I need this, I need that. I even wrote down what he demanded, which was a bran muffin.
And yogurt.
And yogurt. And now I was like, okay, that stuck out to me because, again, I was young at the time, but I remember the adults in my life, the women eating yogurt. And I went back, I'm like, what was it? And I remembered, I did some research. It's like the Snackwells, like diet.
The Yoplait, all that stuff.
And it said, and I read it in an article, and it said that during the 90s, yogurt started to switch to being like more dessert flavors. So that you could like replace your dessert with a yogurt.
It's still a health food by 90s standards. Yeah.
So I think that was this other pop culture that was referenced was that the yogurt there. Yeah. And that was, and he also needed his newspaper, which was probably the Seattle Times, maybe the Boston
and his
Globe.
Starbucks. Remember, Starbucks hadn't achieved its ubiquity that it has now. So like Starbucks was very much a Seattle institution in the early 90s. Yes. And so the fact that he wants his specific blend from Starbucks with the grind that he likes and everything, I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. Daphne's gone and added allspice and eggshells to it. Apparently adding eggshells reduces bitterness.
Oh, it does. And this is something that I found so remarkable about this part of the episode, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. So Frasier, at this part of the episode, is so deeply committed to his specific morning routine. He's got his coffee, he's got his bran muffin and his yogurt, he's got his newspaper. But if you think about Frasier and his general kind of sense of taste and aspirations, it's actually weird that he doesn't like Daphne's coffee better because it's reduced the acidity and the bitterness. It's better for his stomach. It should make him like feel like it's a more like smooth, flavorful experience.
And so he's actually for no reason, and it's also just pretentious.
It is pretentious, and that should be something that Frasier likes. And so this is really funny because he's so stubborn in his pre-breakfast, pre-coffee moment that he can't even accept something that he should prefer. And so I found that really funny. And it's repeated when his dad makes breakfast. He makes the was it called like the egg in a basket or with the toast?
Okay, eggs in a nest.
Eggs in a nest. That's what it is. Okay, so here's the funny part about
Martin's got a totally different approach to breakfast than Frasier does.
He does, but if you think about it,
it's a working man's breakfast. Like that's
you know what a working man's breakfast does? A working man's breakfast fuels your day. That bran muffin and yogurt is going to make Frasier crash right before lunch. So I think it's hilarious that he's acting against his own self-interests so heavily just because he has
several times. Yes. And here's the other thing I thought too. Back then, you can throw your nose in the air to the eggs in the nest, but nowadays that's avocado toast.
Oh yeah.
That's what it is, So, because I'm like eggs in the nest. Once I looked up the recipe, I was like, oh, I would eat this. This is.
Oh, I eat those all the time.
Probably eat it off of a fancier plate or something, not like a Denny's. No offense to Denny's, but
no shame about Denny's.
Yes. No, I've had many a moons over at Miami over there. But the eggs in the nest, I was like, that's still a hearty breakfast.
Make those like on weekdays. That's a quick breakfast, but it's protein rich. It has protein, fat, and carbs. You get all your macros. Frasier should be eating this up, and instead he's rejecting it because like 90s health food, lore said that bran muffins and yogurt is the way to go. It's so funny. Exactly. He's really and for someone who has been to medical school, you would think he would have a better sense of his nutritional needs.
He says it's my low-fat, high-fiber. He sounds like a brand commercial. But then he kind of concludes with his like immature. And I wouldn't call it immaturity, but maybe just being resolved. He says, and that is the magic that is me, which is me.
Yeah,
as to say, like you can't change that. This is how I am. I know I'm being horrible right now.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing looking at this from like the the perspective of what Frasier does for a living is he is every client when they go into therapy for the first time. He thinks he's fine as he is. He's insistent on his routines. And this is just so great to look at Frasier the patient throughout the show, because at this stage he's set in his ways and he thinks he doesn't need any changes.
Yeah, and here he is, newly divorced, and he's obviously trying to look after his figure.
I know, right? That's the funny thing. And that's why he's leading into the brand and the yogurt. But, you know, the funny thing is if he just, you know, walked with Eddie or something, it would probably have a better impact.
You know what? And as a newly divorced woman, I can tell you, yeah, you do look after your figure. You're like, oh, wait, I got to fix all this. I got to lift it up, girls. We got to lift these up and tighten it up. So, you know?
Draw attention away from his haircut.
Yes, exactly. So I get, and I was when I read his thing, I was like, oh, actually, I would eat that for breakfast. Like I would eat a bread muffin now, but back then, no.
Oh,
I'm like,
oh, I'm all in on the egg in a nest. The bread muffin can stay on the grocery shelf for me.
See, even a muffin for me sounds too extravagant.
Really? What's your breakfast?
Yeah. Toast, porridge. Okay. Yeah.
Ooh, porridge. Okay. I feel like porridge is like a Niles and Maris kind of food.
Is it oatmeal? It's oatmeal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like oatmeal.
Okay. It's like soupy oatmeal.
It's a little different texture.
Okay.
Than at least than what we would consider oatmeal in the States. But yeah, no, that's a good idea. It's fiber rich.
Have you guys ever had grits?
I love grits.
Delicious.
I love grits.
Delicious.
Yes.
I've never had grits. I've heard of grits, but it's not a thing.
You need to.
And that's another thing that I think that Frasier would probably like, ooh, grits, you know, like I'm not a bird or something, you know, but it's another thing. It's delicious. It's kind of like the eggs in a nest. It's just, it hits the spot.
It does. It does.
What I'm saying is what I'm calling porridge, I'm meaning oatmeal.
Yeah, they're super similar. I think there might be slight variance in preparation, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, we call.
Do you have coffee too?
Do you have coffee? She's in Australia, not the moon.
We do have coffee here. I actually don't like coffee.
Oh man,
Australia is actually quite a major coffee drinking country. Actually.
You guys have very good coffee. Ooh, okay, you're missing out. I've been to some excellent coffee places when I was in Australia, and you guys do it probably second best to the Italians. And it's partly like when I would go to the like Lygon Street in the more Italian district in Melbourne, like I had some of the best coffee in my life.
Iced coffee? No, because it's so hot, or just you drink it?
Iced coffee. We do iced coffee.
Yes. Well, I'm a Starbucks girly. I own stock in Starbucks, so
very nice.
Yeah. There's actually not many Starbucks in Australia. They went under in the global financial crisis back in 2008. And they sort of haven't. They didn't sort of bounce back much.
But I wonder if that's also because you have so many premium options that Starbucks didn't have a place.
Yeah, it seems to sort of be making a comeback. There's a Starbucks not too far from us, and I remember my husband and I went and got a drink. He got a coffee, and I got, what did I get? I got can't remember what I got.
Was it one of the dessert things?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was like a chocolate, like an iced chocolate or something like that. And
okay.
Yeah, it was quite sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I won't travel to places with no Starbucks. I have to have a Starbucks. I really do. That's my mark of civilization.
This is like your United Nations standard.
It really is. It's like my safe zone. It's my neutral zone.
Like that's fair.
So we got a few of the American chains.
You have Hungry Jack's, which we call Burger King, and I got so confused why the logo looked the same and the font was the same, but the name was different. I was just like, what's going on here? But it's the same. Yeah,
apparently there was a copywriting issue when they came to Australia, so they just decided to go with Hungry Jack's.
Yeah.
The burgers are better at Hungry Jack's.
They actually, you know what, I'll agree with that, because you put beetroot and egg on it, and we don't do that. So, yeah, I agree.
You want to turn something Aussie? Put beetroot and egg on it.
It's true. Pizza, pasta, burgers. Yeah. It's true.
This is all news to me.
Like if it's labeled as it being an Aussie, the Aussie burger always has beetroot on it.
Oh my lord!
That egg really brings something together. I actually started putting eggs on my burgers after visiting Australia because I was like, this should add something.
I'll have to try that.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna have to do a live version of this podcast one day. Maybe for
Hungry Jack's. From
no, not Hungry Jack's. There's better food than that.
Oh, okay.
No, but all right. So maybe we'll celebrate the series finale by doing a live episode from Australia. That'll give us some time to.
Hungry Jack's is a maybe. It's a maybe. we can explore other options.
Yes, we've got plenty of options.
There you go. So back to breakfast. So we've got that comedic scene going on with Frasier's hangriness.
And Daphne quickly picks up not to take Frasier too seriously. Like, she already is making the side eye, like, all right, Frasier, go sit down. Like,
I love this for
whatever.
Her.
Yes.
Yeah, Frasier continues to grumble through his morning. He's upset that his paper's been read and that his morning routine's just been interrupted in general.
Can't have my coffee, can't have my breakfast. Oh, dear God, it wasn't a dream.
You know what, though? I actually have a distinct memory, and this is one of those artifacts of the 90s that, like, just doesn't completely translate to now, because I don't know if people still really read physical papers as much. But I do remember distinctly as a child, having some contention over who got to read which section of the paper first. And so my family would kind of divvy it up. And, my dad would often get really annoyed if someone read the business section before him. And so I kind of get Frasier's standpoint here. Like, you want that nice, fresh, crisp, untouched paper. It's I get it.
Yeah, it's kind of like someone giving you, like a used tissue or something. Like, here you go. Like a handkerchief or something.
Yes.
Yeah. So I see, especially if you're compounding the fact that he hasn't had his breakfast, he hadn't had his coffee, like, yeah, all right, he wants all of this together as a complete part of his balanced breakfast, and it's not there.
And he probably is used to walking around his house naked, and now
probably
he's put clothes on because of his father, and definitely had to put the robe on.
That explains the robe, because
if you get that, don't wear robes around maybe Frasier, but in general, men don't make that a to-do.
So he picked that up last second.
Yeah.
We get that really fun quote from Daphne. 6 more weeks of winter, I see.
Oh, good. I love her sense of humor because she's so nonchalant about throwing these zingers. And it really reminds me, it's like an early exposure of the dynamic between Niles and Roz. It's the same sort of like throwing zingers back and forth. And she's so casual about it. And she's been in the house a day. It's amazing.
Yes, it's literally it's less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
And she's already just a part of the family.
She's making herself at home. It's great.
Yeah, she's not intimidated by Frasier.
No. And you know what? It's so good from a character dynamic standpoint that she does feel so instantly comfortable, because can you imagine if we have Frasier, who's kind of our central character, that's going through this dysregulation, if you will, of not being able to have his own space and adjusting to all of the change, everything in his life at once. If you have another character on that same journey, that's a lot. So Daphne just assimilating immediately is perfectly balanced. I love it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It also it's a good way to highlight that Frasier's being neurotic.
Yeah. So he gives his speech. His father's not moved. He's just like, get used to it.
Yep.
And can we take a minute to acknowledge that cute, adorable, elegant kitchen? I love that kitchen. It's so lovely.
It is. I really love so many things about Frasier's apartment, condo, whatever it is. It's really so well designed. I mean, like, probably, like, would my furniture choices, I would keep the Eames chair, maybe switch out a couple other pieces, definitely keep Marty's chair. But like, some of the other stuff I would change, but I would never trade that kitchen or his view.
No.
Perfect.
That kitchen and that view. The kitchen's as iconic as the rest of the house.
And I really think what gives it its character is the lighting. I really think it's because the lighting was soft. Because I watch a lot of Golden Girls, and I like a lot, maybe an unhealthy amount. But, one thing I've always noticed is that in the Golden Girls kitchen, you could tell the light was shining at them, because you could sometimes get in the reflection of there would be like a kettle or a pot or a pan or glass, anything reflective. But here it was like it just didn't seem like you were kind of looking down into a kitchen. It just felt like you were just in the room, and the lighting was at the right level. It's really nice. I really like it.
I agree. I think the set team and the lighting team that worked on this show did an impeccable job of not making it look too artificial.
Yeah, exactly. Artificial is the perfect word. Yeah, because it's competing against that artificial backdrop that we all know as viewers is artificial. So I guess, maybe
this condo's not real?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That would be a great Airbnb, wouldn't it? Frasier's
Oh my
apartment.
goodness. That I would live there over the Friends apartment any day.
Yeah. There's
Nice.
just something very welcoming about Frasier's apartment.
Like
and
the
I've
view.
got to say, yeah, view. I know. I wanted to move and live in Seattle because of that view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, conveniently, and this is actually, and I know we're jumping a little ahead, so I'll just sort of tease this out. Later in the episode, there is a rainstorm, so maybe you might want to take those words back because those do happen all the time in Seattle. But I was really pleased to see that little bit of authenticity in this episode that like they go outside and just starts pouring rain.
That Coco Chanel couch looks really comfy as well. It's a bit
It does.
When Frasier's setting himself up on the couch a little later, it just looks so comfortable.
It truly does. Yeah. So I think what happens in between breakfast, I think he goes to the station, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we cut to Frasier's radio show where the complaints of the morning lend itself to today's theme, intrusion. He's very insistent. He's very insistent on his listeners following the theme, but it sounds like that they haven't been. And we get Leonard on the phone, and he's got the opposite problem. He's agoraphobic. He's not seen one in 8 months.
Yes, Leonard, and your comments on intrusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I pinned on this so hard as a really, really good sitcom setup in which Frasier, who is like extremely educated and theoretically has built up years of his practice and like should be very good at his job, is objectively being bad at his job because his personal life is distracting him. Yes. And so it's real in that way because we've all been through that. We've had times at work when we can't focus, and so we just get in our zone because of whatever's going on in our lives. But like, it's extra comedic because Frasier is someone you would almost hold to a better standard, that you'd be like, no, you're going to be a professional. You're going to help solve these people's problems. And then Leonard calls in and Frasier is like dismissive and unhelpful and
distracted.
Yeah.
I know, he's grouchy. He wants a chance to complain, basically.
Yeah.
He wants his viewers to open it up so he can complain about annoying intrusive people.
Yeah.
People in his space.
It's so funny because like one of the cardinal rules of being a therapist is you should talk way less than the people you're listening to. Like, and that's the thing. It's even evident in Frasier's show's tagline, "I'm listening." That's what he's supposed to be doing. And in this case, he's abjectly not listening. He's just trying to direct what's happening. It's really brilliant from a comedic standpoint. It's also really frustrating if you look at it from like trying to assess how well he's doing his job.
Yeah. Well, after the show, Frasier tells Roz to hold his messages as he intends to use the soundproof booth to get some much-needed time alone to read his book. Unfortunately, this piece is shattered as this is our first meeting of Bulldog.
Yes, we are introduced.
Love him. We need a gong.
Who we today would say that he's suffering from ADHD, perhaps. I mean, like if you look at his character, he's, just a very hyperactive person.
Yeah. He's got impulse control issues for sure. Like when he freaks out about the Cassell tape or the Lasorda tape and they're right there and then he's like, oh, never mind. Like he's up and down. And so like, yeah, maybe hints of ADHD, but I mean, if we really want to armchair him, like you could have like a sitcom like encapsulation of like a bipolar swing as well. Because he just really goes quite up and then quite back down. So yeah.
Well, remember, he was just like, "Where's this cassette? Where's this cassette?" Like he's like very yeah. And then he hit himself in the head. I didn't like that. I never like when a guy does that because it's never gonna be a good thing, Like
no,
it's just so like macho. It's like ugh.
Yeah,
it's a great introduction to Bulldog. It sets his character so well because, like in the pilot episode where we were introduced to all the characters through facet of Frasier. We're introduced to Bulldog in the same way, and his character is just so much his character.
He's explosive, but in like such a great comedic way.
I do like how his character matured.
Yes. Oh, he goes through such a great arc.
As the seasons went, I really liked seeing that. I liked seeing that my girl Roz matured too because she started talking about her sex life. And I'm not gonna lie, I talk that openly about everything with my mother. So when Frasier talk to your mom that way, she's like talking about her sex life, and she goes, "Yeah, it's my mother." Like, and I'm like, I get that, Roz.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. This is such an interesting inspection into the family dynamics of every character, because Roz actually has a dynamic with her mother that you would almost expect Frasier to have with a parent, because he's a therapist, right? Like he should be vulnerable and self-disclosing and like, open and self-reflective, and he's not, and Roz is, and so it's just kind of funny because it inverts their
But what stood out to me when I saw that was I thought it was more gendered. But now that we're talking, I think it's gendered and generational. Because I feel like women are encouraged to have open relationships with their daughters. I think as the generation has come, I think there's more openness about womanhood and life and things between children. Whereas with men, I think you can see that with Frasier, he's suffering.
They got walls up.
There's walls. And that's because he's fathered by a parent who we would call maybe the silent generation, where you don't talk about stoic, you don't but paternal, and you don't question. Whereas Roz might be from that. She strikes me as like maybe her mom was maybe like a hippie or just more educated or something, and maybe had a different perspective about having family relationships. So I thought maybe it was a little gendered, women and their friendships with their moms, and then and men having a tough time talking and sharing.
I love these observations. I think you're right on both counts. I just think it's so interesting that Roz, at least in this episode, is basically impervious to Frasier's problem of needing space, because she invites the intrusion into her life and Frasier's rejecting it. So it's just such a great contrast. It's also like, it's just a neat positioning of how different their characters are, but how they can learn from each other.
Honestly, I wonder what kind of relationship Frasier had with his mother, because it seems to be hinted a bit later down the line that he had a bit more of an open relationship with his mother. Because he spoke to her about his divorce to Lilith and got not to Lilith, I think to his first wife.
Yes.
And got sort of that kind of support and that kind of love and everything. But there's also the distance. So he hasn't lived in Seattle for years before moving back.
But it's important to remember that line from the first episode about how a handshake is as good as a hug. I mean, that didn't come from Marty. That came from the mom. So it's the dynamic in the Crane family is interesting. It's unique, and for sure.
Niles said it as if probably exactly how his mother would have said it. Like, boys, a handshake is just as good as a hug, and then, so it tells me like loving and nurturing. And I liked how succinct and to the point Frasier described his father. I don't even remember exactly how he said in his conversation to Roz, but I think he just kind of said like, with my dad, it's like, it just is what it is.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, Frasier and Niles came from somewhere, and it's, I mean, I think as the series goes on, we get a little more insight into the nature nurture side of things and which parent influenced them in which ways. But this is an obvious, this series just kicked off. A really key thing that the writers wanted to convey is, look how different these people are. And so we get to see the contrast in the family dynamics before we come around and see where a lot of these patterns were shaped.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, we haven't really seen all these characters interact with each other. They're all just interacting with Frasier.
Not yet.
So currently, we're seeing all these characters as they act in relation to Frasier. So it's still...
Yep, he's still the son.
Yeah, and it's still like pilot mode, in my opinion.
I felt like they kind of kept the scenes the same. Like they didn't change anything. It was still just strong. Like, here's the cafe, you guys. This is the radio station. And we're going to add a little bit more each time. And I like that. The writers were gentle with the change. Like, they understood. Whereas Frasier is kicking and screaming about the changes.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, we're being eased into our routine, basically.
Which I think is interesting, because if Frasier is a Cheers spinoff, that show did the exact same thing. They had basically the exact same set for so many episodes before we ever branched out of what occurred outside of the bar. Frasier's doing a slow roll too, but with slightly more diverse settings, because Cheers, I mean, like, we didn't even move for one corner of the bar for quite some time.
Yeah. Cheers was very insular, and that's how the show was sort of designed, was to be all in.
And do you think that design still exists now with the reboot? Because I've read articles about the reboot season 2, and I've heard a lot of them say that this show is easing into itself. And I just wonder.
I can see that happening. I think it's easing into itself much more quickly than the original. The first, iteration of Frasier took a slower burn. We got more locations, if you will, and more characters than Cheers did at the beginning. And so it happened a lot more quickly than some other shows. But I think if we look at the reboot, different.
Mm-hmm. I think it took 2 to 3 seasons. I think I remember like the third season being like, okay, this has legs.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I feel like part of a reboot issue is that it doesn't have the number of episodes to.
It doesn't. No, they have to jam a lot more into a short time. I agree.
They have less than half the number. They've got 10 episodes to get everything, so they can't waste 2 episodes on opening everything up.
One thing that makes the Frasier shows remarkable is the dialogue. And I think that if you're squeezing more into an episode, you're now maybe going to have to rely on physical comedy or some other thing, so the pace maybe goes. But whereas with Frasier, the pace is slow, but it's nice. It's like a nice little rock. Yeah. It's like rocking, like a gentle. You're like on a boat or something. You're kind of just going with it. It's nice.
It's also super appropriate to the nature of Frasier as a character. I mean, he's a deliberate person. He has routines. He has patterns. He has things he likes, and he likes his life to be fairly tidy. And obviously, part of the comedic tension that we have is that he's got all these other people to deal with, so he can't just have those routines the way he wants them. But that's what makes it a sitcom. And it also allows the creators of the show to be selective about how and when they branch out beyond just these limited contacts. So it's a good journey to be on. And I think the first iteration of Frasier did it exceptionally well. And the reboot has reboot challenges, but we'll get there when we get there.
I'm exactly. This character is 40 years old. It will work itself out, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It is objectively weird to me that I am the age of Frasier in season 1. I mean, like, it is really, really just shocking because I think about where I mean, like, and this can be saved for another time, but like the distance between how I live my life and how Frasier lives his life. Oh my. And that's not just a function of family dynamics. It's not just a function of time, because I mean, like, I don't know, if I were in Seattle in the 90s, I probably wouldn't have his apartment. So I don't know. It's really fascinating to see how real things are, but also how absolutely staged for television they are too.
I know. I'm the age Niles is now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
And I was gonna say, the whole stage bit, we get that through Niles, because the minute he opens his mouth, something extra, off the wall, frivolous is about to come out of his mouth.
Yes.
Much like me.
I love it. Am I the Frasier to your Niles? Amazing.
Simone's Roz.
Oh, I love this. And Simone, you have a bit of a Roz-like story to share later.
I think I do. I was gonna say, I was like, I think I'm Roz.
I think you are. Look at how serendipitous this dynamic is. All right, so I guess back to the episode. So he's just gotten kicked out of his soundproof booth with his book, and he needs I
couldn't catch the title of the book. Could anybody catch the title of the book?
The Holotropic Mind. It's an actual book. It's an actual book.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
I believe it. Yeah, I believe that it was probably a really popular. Was it published in the 90s? I don't know anything about this book.
Okay, hang on. The Holotropic Mind is it's about the 3 levels of human consciousness. This is a deliberate joke on the part of the writers, because if you think, oh my goodness, I don't want to spend too much time unpacking this, but this is absolutely chosen on purpose.
You have the floor. You have the floor.
All right, think about what we've seen in this episode so far, right? You have Frasier and his intrusion that he's experiencing, or his perceived intrusion, is basically like suggesting that he's, I don't know, like it's a challenge for him, right? So
definitely.
the concept of consciousness is like being, you want to be moved towards, like, holotropic suggests, like, it's a similar word to holistic, right? Holo suggests whole. And the back part of the word with tropic is like a journey. So you want to journey towards your whole self. Frasier in this episode is incapable of reaching his perceived whole self because of all this intrusion going on. Oh my goodness.
And he's kind of been yanked out of it, if you're being honest, because he starts his day disoriented. And if you think about whenever we wake up, I mean, there's an expression, wrong side of the bed. I mean, that is a thing. And sometimes when you're it's kind of like when you're pulled out of a nightmare. I mean, when you are pulled out of a good sleep or something, you're just kind of being thrusted into the day. And it's, so maybe you're right. It's, as you explain, that concept of the consciousness and the different levels, and, having the ability to travel through those on your own journey and have control, which is what we all crave. We want control over our life,
right?
Because the time is going. We want to make the most of our life. So we're always trying to control everything.
Oh, this is hilarious too, because if we think about the scene that comes forward after he tries to open this book, okay, if you're reading like a thick text on like consciousness and your journey towards achieving your whole self, that's not really the easiest thing to immerse in. You have to have like almost like a meditative like focus to be able to participate in reading that. He keeps getting interrupted. There's no way he's able to authentically read this book. That's hilarious. Like, it's almost the worst possible thing he could be reading at that time.
I do love the way Marty describes the book. He goes, thick. Like, it was just like, I
it's
feel
so
like
true.
he's maybe called some people's butts that as well. Like, that's exactly what he describes. Like, ooh, wow, yummy, thick. Like, oof, that's thick.
Oh, man. Yeah. No, but this, I'm so glad, Laura, that you picked up on the cover, because
I couldn't for the life of me catch it. I couldn't catch it.
No, that's so like dark. An Easter egg. That the fact that he's reading this dense text that requires an incredible amount of sustained focus in order to really read it correctly. Oh, that's rich. I love it.
We get to one of my favorite parts of the episode. So Frasier turns down Roz's offer for coffee and decides to head to a park to sit and read. And then we cut to a title card and thunder over a black screen, and it says "Best Laid Plans."
I love it.
Isn't it ironic? I mean, Elena Morissette called it, So it's like, tries to do one thing and he's just unable to.
So instead of a park, Frasier heads home, and as he arrives home, he finds the house is empty. And he decides to use this opportunity to settle down and, get a bit of alone time, singing a silly song, setting up his couch and everything. And he just gets settled when Daphne and Martin arrive back from, I think she says from physical therapy, but they've got Eddie, so they probably went to the park as well.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been like, doing some Tai Chi in the park with the dog.
It could have actually, I was going to say it probably was physical therapy, and she just sugarcoated it as a walk in the park.
Yeah.
For both of them, both Eddie and Martin.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Why not? They both need it. It's good. Mobility is important.
Definitely.
So, by the way, I just want you to know that I found a copy of that book on Amazon, and it's $11, so I'm ordering it.
We want a full report by next recording.
Absolutely. I'll tell you about the my own journey towards consciousness.
It sounds fun.
You know what, though? Actually, what he does when he's like trying to relax in this moment while everyone is still away at the park prior to getting rained out, I really do think sitting on that comfy couch with that thick book and a glass of wine, I could get behind that. I absolutely could get behind that. Like, and this is one of those small moments in which, like, we were joking before about the characters we resonate with, but I find Frasier incredibly relatable as a character and as a human, on so many levels. But like, I love this particular just comfy moment of relaxation that he's really, really trying to have. But even then, he's choosing a really heady intellectual book to relax with, and I'm like, respect. I love this.
Yeah, and Daphne's a bit judgmental, I feel. She says, I'll make you a pot of tea. And he's like, oh, I've got a glass of wine here. And she checks her watch and she's like, I see.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
what was that? I didn't get that because I'm like,
Frasier's show ends at 5. It's like after 5.
exactly.
I feel like perfectly appropriate for wine.
Yeah, we
it's
will
5 o'clock
maybe.
somewhere anyways.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, come on.
Yeah. No, that is a moment of it's a little moment of shade from Daphne. You're right. But it's authentic to how she kicked things off at breakfast that morning.
Yeah.
She's giving him the side eye. She's dishing it right back at him. So I think this is it's Frasier can drink as much wine as he wants at whatever hour he wants to, but I do think it's a good dynamic moment between those characters.
Mm-hmm.
So Martin sits down. Frasier explains he wants to read his book in silence. Martin complies with this, but apparently that's not good enough for Frasier. He seems to be annoyed just by Martin's presence.
Mm-hmm. No, he told Martin to leave him alone. I would never in my life tell my mother to leave me alone. She would throw her shoe at me. Like, I was like, wow, like, how could you say that? I mean, Marty took it well, but I was like, oh my gosh, that would not happen in my house. My mother would be very, like, who are you talking to?
Yeah, like, if Frasier wants some space, just go into his bedroom.
I thought about that. I said, he has a lovely bedroom, but it is kind of not so cozy. It's not the coziest.
It's not. He doesn't have those beautiful full-length windows in the same way. And I think this is still part of the territory battle that began in the pilot episode where he's like, this was my space. Why can't I just have my couch? Like, it's not that he couldn't go to his room because, he's a grown man. He can absolutely move his book and his wine over and just relax on his bed. But why should he have to?
He lost his study space to death.
Yeah,
so that probably would have been where he would have been reading had Daphne not been there. He would have been in the study.
Yeah, his personal space is shrinking by the moment, and that's truly, I love, like, the title of this episode is just so right. Space Quest. Oh, it's good.
It should be an emotion, and I think it should be not necessarily like, tied to physical space. I think sometimes we want space quest in our own identities, in our own life, in our own careers. Like, we just need time to just find where we are supposed to be planted for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah,
full agree.
Yeah, so they have an argument about this. I like the line where Martin's like, "You should just change me to the radiator in my bedroom." Frasier's like, "Perhaps only evenings."
And that's a theme that you see in the Golden Girls as well. Sorry to go back there, but I will, because you see the dynamic between Sophia and Dorothy, and sometimes Dorothy will make these jokes, like they'll be the girls just in the kitchen, and then and Sophia will come in, and Dorothy will be like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm sorry, Godolphy, like, the warden let me out, and I just wonder, from like a senior's perspective, living with their adult child, like, what is it like? I need to know.
Happy to be able to offer something here. So there's an entire concept in psychology research specific to Western culture and almost really specifically to American culture, because we don't have as much intergenerational households and intergenerational living as several other places in the world. And so we prioritize, individual achievement, individual paths. But when we reach our golden years, things aren't always set up really well for us. And there's like a couple things that go on in terms of like losing your independence, losing your ability to function the way you're used to. And so what it does is it kind of takes you on this journey where you're almost arcing back towards childhood when someone had to care for you. And that has a lot of impact on the psyche for folks, especially like Martin. He probably didn't plan to go on that particular journey until at least 10 years later, but his injury forced his hand. And so now he's living with Frasier. He has a home healthcare worker, and both of those moments, but also all of these little tiny day-to-day things are adding up as signals that are just saying, hey, you can't do this on your own. Yep. You can't hack this. And
ironically, Marty's having his own space quest in this episode, but it's invisible or being overshadowed.
He's dealing with it a little more cleanly than Frasier is.
And Daphne, I mean, if you think about it, all three of them are all having their own individual space quests. Even Eddie.
It's true.
4. Because Eddie counts too.
They all do.
Everyone has it. But Frasier's the only one.
Frasier has to make it about him. Yeah. So even though, you're absolutely right. Every single character in this episode has some personal space issue or tension. But yeah, Frasier is really taking it the hardest, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's ironic because he's the one who should be the most equipped to handle this
of
with
all
grace.
people.
Yeah, it was like you're on the radio dispensing advice to other people about their situations. Yeah,
just shows how self-centered he is.
yes, but it's also it's such a great positioning of Frasier as someone who is on his own journey, and it's really great to watch that evolve as the series goes on.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So Frasier storms out after their argument and heads to Cafe Nervosa, where he finally manages to read his book. Then Niles arrives.
Oh, what fresh hell is this?
Can I just say that this quote is my favorite Frasier quote that comes up in this scene when he's talking to Niles? This, I believe, is, well, and of course it is because it's the second episode. This is the first instance of Frasier dramatically exclaiming, "Oh, what fresh hell is this?" And I die. I die every time I hear it because I'm just like, that is the ultimate.
That's a nice way to greet your brother.
Oh yeah, it's the ultimate Frasier line, and I love that we got this as a gift in episode 2.
Yes,
and I love the way he says it and delivers it, and it gives each time.
Yes, it gives dramatic stage actor who is in a sitcom right now, but yes. I love it. Yeah,
and then Niles spoils the end of Frasier's book.
Which is even funnier. Given the topic of the book.
And how thick it is.
Right, but how do you spoil someone's personal journey towards their full self and deepest layer of consciousness? Like, that's I don't even think you could truly do that, but that's why it's great.
Yes.
It's honestly like finding someone's like spiritual text and be like, oh yeah, at the end this happens. Like, no. You know?
I love that bit though, where he's like,
it's so good.
Holotropic Mind.
Oh, I have that book on the way now from Amazon, which is a Seattle company.
So Frasier gripes to Niles about Martin and how he's considering moving Martin and Daphne into their own apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Niles talks Frasier out of this, protecting his own interests before he even knows he's got his own interests in it.
But do you think that he really would have gone through with that? Because that sounds very expensive.
It does. And I think that's part of the drama there, is that the choice is actually like an objectively bad one. It's expensive. Yeah. It's complicated. It is also like very emotionally charged.
Now that I think of it, I do remember a conversation I had when I was in college where like I discovered my boyfriend at the time was cheating on me, and like I told my best friend, I was like, I'm gonna do this, and she's like, girl, do you want to do that? Like, that's like jail time. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess we all need a Niles to kind of talk us off the ledge of our like drama.
Mm-hmm. Which I do appreciate Niles in that position, because of just the way that he and Frasier interrelate. It is so funny that he's the one who just calmly is just like, nope.
No.
Yeah, he reminds Frasier that the reason he wanted Martin to live with him was because he wanted to get close to his father.
Mm-hmm.
So Frasier thanks Niles and calls him a good brother and a credit to the psychiatric community. Niles replies saying, Frasier's a good brother too.
I love that joke.
I love that joke.
Niles zingers are so good, and he always takes Frasier down a professional peg without fail. Like that, I don't even know if I have any examples of him not doing it.
Oh, another legendary Pierce performance! Like he did it.
He crushes it.
I love that one. So back at the apartment, Daphne, going through her own space quest, is moving out the last of Frasier's things from her new room, and before leaving to go get building services to pick up the furniture. Frasier asks Martin for a conversation. They set a time of 3 minutes because Martin's program's about to start.
I love this. It's such a good way to operate within the time constraints that are necessitated by the sitcom format, because we don't have infinite time to watch this. But it keeps things funny.
Mm-hmm. And also, as a parent, you sometimes have to pull out the timer with the kids. Like, I just need you to just try for 3 minutes to just do this thing for me. Just try it, okay?
Yeah. It's so effective. So
you don't want it, we will get rid of it, but I need you to just try it.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing, the human capacity to get things done in 3 minute spans.
I remember we had really severe water restrictions in Australia because we were going through a pretty major drought, and we had a little timer for a shower, and we had like 4 minutes.
Oh
Brutal.
no! And what would happen? Would you get like a ticket or something? Would you be fined if you went over your allotted amount?
I don't think there was any sort of actual. But I think there's some fines for excess water usage, but they're just trying to promote it as a way for everyone to save water.
Okay.
Because
I would have just mailed a check to the water company. I'm done taking showers. I know, but I am. I'm just using up somebody else's minutes they didn't.
Yeah. So Frasier shares something close and personal with his father for the first time. He shares his suicide attempt from an episode of Cheers.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have watched Cheers, but
Yep.
when I first watched Frasier, I didn't realize that this was actually from an episode of Cheers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's a really good connection between the two shows, and we'll obviously see a lot more of those later on, especially with some of the character reappearances. But yeah, that's a good point. If you didn't watch Cheers or didn't watch it in close proximity to your experience with Frasier, that's a new bit of information. It also recontextualizes the way it came out in that Cheers episode. So yeah, and it's a tough topic to bring up. So kudos
and
to
it
the show
shows
for
him as such a fragile soul. Like he's a fragile soul. He's definitely
he's vulnerable.
Yes, and as a parent of an empath, my son is an empath, and he's a very kind soul, and it's very difficult sometimes for them to admit when they feel just so overwhelmed by life, and to really get that across to someone else, like this is really heavy for me, and I really need you to know that.
Yeah. It's so hard to ask for help when you are at that place, and
especially if you're a man. I think men are discouraged from doing such.
But also think about his career. He's in the psychiatric profession. That's almost like a double, because it's almost like physician heal thyself. Like, why are you there? And so, he's got a lot of layers there, both with the way he's been socialized, the way his career plays into it, the way this folds out with people who are around him who aren't necessarily equipped with the professional experience that he has. Like if Frasier were on the other side of this, he might be better able to help someone than the people who were around him because they're not trained for it. And that's like such an important layer that it's really easy to miss, because like you kind of forget that sometimes like you need a professional to help with stuff like that.
Yeah,
I feel like after watching the episode of Cheers where this event does happen, and watching it and like being recounted here, I feel like they recontextualized it to take some of the humor out of it, because there's a lot of humor in the episode where Frasier would, like, later down the line they downplay it again in another episode, but here it's a very vulnerable thing that Frasier's sharing with his father.
Yeah. And I think that duality there is also a very real portrayal, because the events that happen to us in our lives at some moments feel like they are the biggest, most impactful thing that have ever happened to us. And then at other times you can make light of them. And it takes a certain amount of processing and growth to be able to do that. And I think that's kind of how the show employs that.
It's a journey, much like the book. It's a journey. It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a thick journey.
Absolutely.
And Martin shares something, and it starts to sound like that it's something emotional, but it just turns out that he can turn his like eyelid inside out.
Which, you know what, that's Marty's way of being like diffusing things, because again, like Martin is not a trained psychiatric professional. And it's not necessarily fair to expect him to know how to handle stuff. So he's using the tools he has, and in his life experience, humor is a way that works.
But he does it in a healthy way and not in a toxic way, because he relieves the pressure. But he immediately, each time I've seen him do it thus far, he validates what Frasier is saying. And as a parent, that's important to validate your children, whether they're small or an adult, because I'm an adult child and I have a close relationship with my mom. And sometimes I just want her to validate my feelings.
Yes.
And, so I thought that was a good representation of healthy male
parental
love.
child dynamics.
Parental love. Yeah. It's like a good role model of how you can kind of have that comedic relief, comedic
comedic
that comedy relief but still also, keep it moving in that healthy direction. Where sometimes the toxic means like, let's make fun of you and turn it around on you, and now I'm projecting on you, because that sometimes is modeled for men.
And what this shows as well is this is the first instance we get of Martin's inability of being vulnerable. They touch on it later on in the series, but this is the first time we actually see it in play, where he's incapable of being. Actually, no, the first time we would have seen it would be the pilot episode where he couldn't say thank you to Frasier.
Yeah, but it's good to see this kind of as a continuous thing with him, because then it shows an opportunity for character growth.
Yes.
And it shows that he is listening. Like, that's ironic. Like, Marty is always listening. Marty is always listening. He's listening to Daphne's problems. He's listening to Ross' problems. He's listening to... Like, he's always listening. But you very rarely hear him tell his problems. So, isn't that funny?
Yeah. Yeah, that might be a little bit of where Frasier gets it from, even though he might not be ready to process that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And after their argument, Frasier broaches the subject of Martin moving out, but Martin refuses, saying that the kind of relationship Frasier wants to build takes a couple of years. So this is in Martin's way showing that he wants to build that relationship as well.
Yeah. It's also him giving some very, very sage life advice to Frasier, because, like, if you think about Frasier's work, he takes radio callers and tries to help them get through their problems in a matter of minutes. Obviously, that's not a realistic way to solve anything, and it's good for entertainment value, which is kind of what the point of radiotherapy is, but it's not good for real problems. And Marty has the context and the wisdom to know that it's a slow burn. You can't just get instant results, and Frasier's being realistic by expecting that.
Yeah,
the wisdom, it definitely shines through.
Yeah,
it's kind of like he was a book.
Yeah, Frasier seems to get on board with it.
Yeah, absolutely. He might be on his journey, but he's receptive.
Martin asked Frasier to have a beer with him, and Frasier's touched by the gesture, even when he has to go to the shop to buy them first.
I love that moment too, because it's just such a good little, kind of a jab, but it's also very funny.
And we get a title card just before the credit, which is, I think they only do this twice in the series. So we get the title card, and then we get the end credits, which show that Frasier's finally found a place to be alone in his storage space.
Yeah, that's such a hilarious little moment. And it's also, I love that it was set up a couple scenes prior when Daphne is moving the furniture. So know there is a storage space, but you don't see how that joke callback is going to be made until it happens.
No.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. And it goes to show, like, we do all need, like, a room of one's own. I mean, I do. I run to my closet, my closet, and I just hide sometimes. Like, I just need a minute of peace and quiet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, they're all officially moved in now.
Yep. We have the set piece, and we've gotten a couple new characters this episode, and ready to start mixing and matching with some character dynamics, which I'm so looking forward to episode 3.
Because now we're going to see the Niles and Daphne dynamic bloom, and it's so beautiful to watch. Until it's not.
Until it's not, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's enjoy this moment.
You're right. I'm sorry.
We got some time.
Yes.
So no, I can't wait for episode 3. I think it's going to be really fun.
So tune in.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, this has been Tossed and Scrambled. I'm Laura.
I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Simone.
We'll catch you next time.
But I don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again. Good night, Seattle. We love you.